Hi, and welcome to the ADHD Continuum podcast, where we explore ADHD across the lifespan. I'm your host, Lucinda Bowman, and this is my co host, Sue Day. We're both ADHD coaches with lived experiences of ADHD ourselves. Our mission is to foster a supportive community for individuals with ADHD, their families, and allies, where they can find practical advice and a genuine sense of belonging. Through candid conversations, expert interviews, and personal anecdotes, we aim to demystify ADHD, challenge misconceptions, and empower our listeners to thrive.
Very good.
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Here we go. We're going.
We're
We're
going. We're doing a
starting.
podcast. We're podcasting.
I know it's an interesting, exciting thing to be doing,
It
and
is.
yeah. So thank you for your idea of the podcast, and I'm just super excited to get going.
Yay. Well, I think we're going to start out like this first episode by just talking about our journey into ADHD and how we came to be here. So, our personal ADHD journey and how we experience things over our lifetime. So, I'm going to ask you a question if you don't mind.
No, I'm ready.
Okay. When did you first realize you had ADHD, or how was your diagnosis process?
It was a long, long time ago. I am one of the few lucky girls in that I got diagnosed, or certainly of our age. I got diagnosed in 1988 uh, when I was failing out of my second high school. And the school I was at was really encouraged that my parents get me tested. And so I got tested and came back ADHD with flying colors. Back then we call it ADD or ADHD. And I was like, well, it's got to just be ADD though, right? Because I'm not hyperactive. I don't like sports. I don't like running around. But they were like, no, you've been sitting here for 4 hours and you haven't stopped moving. Your toes are wiggling and your fingers are fidgeting and you're picking at stuff and you haven't stopped moving at all. You totally have ADHD, which in my which I'm guessing means that I have ADHD combined type. Um,
Yeah.
so I have that good daydreamy, like brain going a million miles an hour, but staring out a window side of me, and then I have the super fidgeting, you can't sit still side of me, and it all combines to be me, who I am. So that's how it started. And it was back in 1988. There was a ton of pushback on ADHD then, as there still is now,
Yeah.
sadly. And, nobody really believed it. So we didn't treat it. And I didn't get treated actually for another 20 years. But I think that's another story.
Wow.
So, yeah, I will ask you the same question. How did you end up figuring out you had ADHD?
So mine was the late diagnosis or later diagnosis. I was not diagnosed until after my son was diagnosed. He was diagnosed early, like 4 or 5. And when he was in the process of getting med trials and all that, I had a therapist and she said, well, of course you have ADHD too. And I said, what? What do you mean I have ADHD? She's like, yeah, you absolutely have it. So that wasn't a diagnosis, but that was my first inkling of hearing that. And then I went off to a psychiatrist and got the official diagnosis of ADHD combined type as well. And I was 48 at the time. So I was definitely late diagnosed, but I definitely had it as a child because that's one thing that they look for. It doesn't just appear out of nowhere when you're an adult. So they had to go do a deep dive into my past and find out about what I was like, and basically like a questionnaire for what you were like as a kid. Did you have these symptoms they want to see that you have it over time. And I definitely did. I just always knew something was different about me. I didn't know what it was. I thought something's wrong, like I'm defective. Something is definitely going on. I felt kind of foreign in my own body. So I knew something was there. And so I felt very relieved to have been diagnosed later in life because it gave it gave me validation for how I felt.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a bad thing. It was a relief. And yeah, so I was older, but
Yeah.
that's what happened to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, despite not actually working on my ADHD, at least I had that knowledge, right? That I wasn't broken,
Yeah.
that there was this thing wrong. So yeah, so it's something we should definitely talk about on the show is how girls and women get diagnosed so much later in life, and how challenging that is for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the next question is, what's one thing you wish you'd known about ADHD earlier in your life?
I wish I had known that I had it, is what I wish. I didn't know, and had I known, and it's funny because I think back to hearing like, "Oh, that kid has ADHD," and thinking of the person bouncing off the wall, like jumping up and down, and that was my view of my perception of ADHD, so it didn't really mesh with what I thought about myself. Same thing, but I was a talker. Talk, 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 talk. All Lucinda's talking too much. So definitely I expressed it verbally, but I just wish I had known that I had it and that it shows up differently. And they really didn't have that information back then
Right.
like they do now. So that's what, how about you? What do you wish that you'd known about ADHD earlier?
Yeah, I really wish I had known, and this is one of my big passions for this podcast. Actually, I really wish I had known to the extent which ADHD was impacting my life.
Mm,
I knew I had it, but I thought I could just push through,
yeah.
right? Until I couldn't push through anymore, and then I was like, well, all I need is a pill, and then I'm fine.
Hmm.
And and it's just not the case. And so I didn't get an idea of how thoroughly it was impacting my life until probably I was just about 50, and I was like, oof, there's something wrong more than I thought, you
Hmm.
know that I need to do something differently. So I think just the extent of both how it impacts and also just sort of the continuum of ADHD, like what we're talking about,
Yeah.
how it impacts everybody at different times, in different ways, at different ages. So, yeah, really wish I knew that whole intricate, what the whole intricate mess of ADHD does for us.
Absolutely. Which is a very good segue into the next question, which how did ADHD show up differently for you in childhood versus adulthood?
Mhm. Yeah. So I don't, in childhood, I was so shy. I was shy. I was quiet.
Mhm.
Um, I, um, I was, I think, sort of happy just to retreat into my own little world.
Mhm.
Um, and in childhood, I think I had a little bit more of the freedom. And this is just me reflecting spur of the moment, because I hadn't really thought of this before. But I think I had more freedom to allow my brain to be my brain.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah. So in the playtime, I was never focused academically.
Mhm.
Um, and, I had the playtime. So I could just be who I needed to be. And because I didn't have very many social interactions, I
Mhm.
didn't notice how it impacted socially I was. Um,
Right.
Although I would guess the shyness was definitely part of that whole scenario.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but later in life, in young adulthood, I think more. I just I didn't have the time anymore to let my brain be my brain, but I had the energy still to just bulldoze through and do what I needed to do. Um, until, I hit sort of perimenopause and the symptoms got too bad and the energy dwindled a little bit, and, burnout
Yep.
reared its ugly head for the umpteenth time, but in the biggest way yet. So yeah, so that's sort of how it's impacted me in different places. How about yourself?
Well, I think that in childhood, I I the interesting thing for me is that I actually attended an art school as a kid, and my mom worked as an art teacher, and so I had a really free childhood where my ADHD really didn't show up because it was so low academically. It wasn't pushing the academics, it was pushing the creativity, which I had in spades. So it didn't really show up there until I got into middle school and high school. And then when it was more academically challenging, or there were just there's more at stake. I definitely my ADHD showed up there, in terms of I had a hard time focusing because I did so much art before, because the school I went to was like ceramics and wood shop, and uh, my mom's art class, and PE was like throughout the day. And then I got to middle school and high school, although I was in an alternative program, which was really very much geared towards me, it was still really hard academically. And then when I reached adulthood, and that was the interesting thing. When I had a kid, it was so hard to manage myself and my kid. And that's when I was diagnosed. It was like, of course I have ADHD. It was hard enough just managing myself. But when you have a kid and they have ADHD, and all their challenges, my ADHD just went through the roof. So it was so apparent then. So managing just myself was a lot easier than being a parent. That was a
Yeah.
hard thing.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. That is when when I had my kiddo, that's when I got my first, like, oh, I need to treat this. So
Yeah.
that's when I started treating it with medication.
Yes. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what I mean. I'd been in therapy over the years, but and that's the other interesting thing, is I had so much therapy, and I was in group therapy and doing all this exploration. No one ever mentioned ADHD until I was 48, which I find fascinating and baffling.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so interesting how they miss it. And
Mhm.
even now, I mean, I hear from clients just horror stories about people about going to therapists who don't understand ADHD. I had one client
And
who said, "Oh, my ADHD therapist, she says she's specializes in ADHD, but she says if I can thrive at work, then I couldn't possibly have ADHD." I'm
mhm.
like, well, I'm sorry to say but your therapist is dead wrong.
Yeah,
And we
yeah,
can do amazing things. Yeah.
yes,
Having ADHD doesn't mean we're a failure. It just
right,
means that we have challenges in various areas of our lives.
right. That's right.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is another segue into the next question, which is about challenges. What were some of your biggest challenges or unexpected strengths
Hmm.
in throughout your lifespan? So challenges or strengths. Maybe you want to start with the strengths.
Yeah. I have enjoyed my ADHD all my life. I have never really resented it.
Okay.
Um, I've resented how I've had to move through the world with it, but I've never actually resented my brain, because my brain does amazing things. I'm creative, and I can be funny. Um, I am. This is an interesting little factoid about ADHD. I'm sure you know, but did ADHD and autism, one of the defining symptoms, if you can call this a symptom, is an uh, outsized sense of justice and fairness, which I have in spades. I have wanted to make a difference in the world since I was a little itty bitty kiddo.
Wow.
Um, and that's my brain, and I see the big picture, and I see, I see sort of how all the pieces interact. And yeah, I just really love all of the bits of my brain that make it, for one, so that I'm unique and the way I am. And for two, they just give me um, so many, I guess I'll just call them strengths. There's so many things that I feel like I can do well and can contribute with. Um, Challenges are definitely there. I dropped out of high school. I had a lot of risk taking uh, behaviors until I was about 28. Like, just didn't. It took me a long time to mature enough to
Yeah.
be in a place where I could realize those risk taking behaviors weren't like they needed to change.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I have had 5 different careers. I went to 5 colleges. Um, I've had 5 different careers, and each one ended with like crash and burn.
Mm.
Uh, you know, but I'm good at picking myself back up and persevering and bulldozing through that next challenge, and so that's great. But it's hard to live in the society with ADHD, and I think all of those are just like the roller coaster of life. Had I had some idea of how to work with my brain and my ADHD, I think I could have really prevented some of the harm I did to others. I didn't have any major aspects of harm, but I harmed relationships, and some of the harm I did to myself. And so I think those are the biggest challenges, is just not knowing how my brain was being impacted and behaving in a way that um, that hurt myself and others,
Yeah.
and for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Powerful.
Yeah. How about you?
I think, yeah, some of my strengths all similar. Creativity, humor. Those are things I thrive on. Uh, Interesting perspective taking, thinking outside of the box. Those are striking things about people with ADHD, and I see them in almost every client I have. And then for me, as I perseverance, I really pushed through even when I got negative criticism or feedback from professors who say, like, you're not going to make it. I'm a speech pathologist. I was in undergrad, and I had a professor say that you're not going to make it in this field. And I felt so bewildered by that because I was so new to the major, and I felt like she was just shooting me down before I'd even started. And I didn't let that stop me. Even though I really respected her, so it hurt. It did, but I got help instead. So I sought out like some tutoring or something through the university that was offered because she thought my writing wasn't up to par. So I just got help and I persevered and went through. And I remember when I started getting A's in my major and I was shocked, like, wow, because I was really able to focus. I was so interested in it. It was fascinating to me, and I did well and went on and got my master's degree, and it seemed very easy almost because I was focused. It was my hyper focus was my major. So that really worked out for me. Um, and then challenges with ADHD, a lot of it similar to yours, a lot of social and some relationship issues, some of my impulsivity really did not, it wasn't very good for relationships. Some of the things I would say, foot in the mouth, like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. And even today, occasionally that will happen and I'll think, geez, why did I say that? Um, so that has been an issue, but it's gotten better over
Mm.
time for sure. I take more time to think. I'm slower paced, probably because I'm older, but I've learned to pace things differently and not act so impulsively, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually another really important thing that we can talk about. You're talking about what you said around saying something and like, oh, why did I say that?
Yes.
And I don't know about you, but for me and a lot of people that I've spoken with, it's the why did I say that? And then it keeps us up at night for a freaking year
Mhm.
because ruminating on like, why
Yes.
did you say that thing? And so this rumination and this like getting into this spiral of just talk about self-talk about why what we do and why. And so it's a great, really great thing to think about when we're doing future podcasts.
And I just want to interrupt that, if I may, and give
Mhm.
myself a tiny plug
Yeah.
for that exact thing. So I am going to be a presenter at the International ADHD Conference, and the title of my presentation is "The Impact of ADHD on Communication Skills." So I'm kind of blending my ADHD and speech pathology knowledge, and so my knowledge of it as being a speech pathologist and communication and how ADHD can impact that and what we can do about it. So I'm going to be talking about that at the conference.
Oh, what a really and what a great subject, and so such an important subject matter. Can't wait to go see it. I will be there as long as I actually just got my schedule. I'm going to be doing a book signing on the 14th from 1:30 to 2, I think. So hopefully
Awesome.
that's not when your thing is.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so great.
Yeah, I am excited about the conference, and we should totally talk about that on another show because
Yes.
well, we should do a live come from our hotel room.
That
And
would be so fun.
yeah,
Yes.
because well, it gives me chills just thinking about being in a hotel with 2,000 other
I
ADHDers. It's
know.
the most powerful. Like, oh,
It's
these
so
are my
wonderful.
people. Yes, yeah, it is. It is wonderful. So thank you for that segue. I really love that.
Yeah.
And that plug. Um, okay, I guess the next question is. Um, we talked about it a little bit already, so maybe we can keep this quick. How have you noticed your ADHD symptoms or coping strategies change as you've gotten older?
Yeah. I think, like so many things in life, a lot of things follow along the same trajectory as neurotypical people. Like you go through puberty, things change, and you go through adulthood and things change. Same thing. I think for us, people with ADHD, we feel things much more fiercely. And so I think my rejection sensitivity dysphoria has really, really gotten better over the years as I evolved as a person. But that is something, the rejection sensitivity that was very significant for me as a child, very. And it got better and better. Probably after my 30s is when it got really, it was starting to resolve itself. And I think coping strategies also have changed. I learned I was very, I will say ADHD, people with ADHD have resilience, and that creativity part of our brains is so helpful in finding strategies that work for ourselves, and we don't even really know it. So it's fascinating to me. I learned so many coping strategies. I didn't even know I had ADHD, in high school, but I learned, hey, I think I should take creative writing or poetry instead of the American Lit class because that sounds too rigid and structured and I need more creative. So I've always been good with strategies, but they've just gotten better over time, really. How about
Yeah,
you?
yeah. Very much the same. And you talked about, different times in people's lives about how in puberty things change, how, and that's so impactful for women with ADHD because one thing they're finding finally is that ADHD is really impacted by our female hormones and our fluctuations in our hormones. And so there's actually a pretty predictable sort of areas of life where women get diagnosed. And it's puberty, it's when they have children, it's
Yes.
perimenopause, and it's menopause, because that's when our hormones are going nutso,
Absolutely.
and we can't manage, as you were talking about, finding the tools and manage the sort of overwhelm and our symptoms of our ADHD. We can't. Our own tools don't work as well during those times, and our medication doesn't work as well during those times. So
Yep.
yeah, just really, really important point there. And so, yeah, and I think, I talked about, I started getting treated when I was 20, when I was 36,
Huh?
when I had my kiddo, 20, 36, it doesn't matter anymore. We're over 50, it's all the same. When I was a baby and I had my baby, when I was a baby at 36 years old, that's when, I first started like, oh, I really need to treat this. And then at 50, when I'm going through perimenopause, that's the second time that I was like, I really need to treat this.
Yes.
So those are the two like times in life where my ADHD was at its absolute worst. And the coping strategies just didn't work during those times.
Yeah.
I also love the creativity that you talk about and the tools that you created. I get so excited when I'm talking to clients and they tell me all of their tools that they use. I'm just like, that's so amazing. You have like 3/4 of what you need. You've
Yeah.
developed all of this by
Yes.
yourself. Just doing
Yes.
this, you can totally bring it. Like you can solve this problem. You may
Mhm.
need me to hold space for you while you do it, but you got this.
Yeah,
And it was our creative ADHD brains. We find the way.
we do. We absolutely do.
Yeah. Sometimes we need help doing it. Sometimes we need help to part of the way is getting help. But yeah, we can find the way.
That's exactly right. Thanks for joining us today on the ADHD Continuum podcast. Now, before we all forget about what we talked about, go ahead and hit subscribe to our podcast, our YouTube channel, and join our mailing list at theadhdcontinuum.com.